Okay, so this is the file from week 12 that you uploaded. And I'm not seeing exactly where we're generating this. I see here we've got our height field scatter points that are coming out right here, and so it looks to me like this is kind of the part that we're paying attention to. So there's your grass, there's your white flower, and I see from your example in the email that this is where you created the attribute and the group expression. Now, the part that I think you might be missing is the tag is the part that matters, right? So under grass, right, you have these points that are tagged as grass, right? So those are your points that are for your grass itself. This is your point for we'll create your white flower, and then this is going to create your wild grass. Those breakups that I was showing you of how to do that with an attribute noise, that noise and that grouping is only meaningful until we modify those tags. So for example, this, white flower maybe is the one that I want to kind of come in and say, great, I want to make an adjustment to those. Those look like they have some type of opacity on them based on their shader. So we'll do this. We're going to turn off materials. And there they are. Okay, so if I'm wanting to, break these up, two things. One, the coverage that you're talking about, the spread. If you're talking about how densely packed these flowers are, that's going to happen here in this density. And I'm sorry I called it coverage. It depends on the node you're using. I believe the scatter and align node, which I should have noticed you weren't using, it's called coverage, and it's called density here. So, in this with the white flower, if we come in and turn down our density, obviously we're going to get less white flower. So that reduced, we can kind of keep going down. Now, the reality is the way this does it is you get kind of these just individual little flowers. But if you want something that's more like pockets of these things, then what we could do, let's see what this guy is here. This is we have no mask on. Oh, that's not going to that. Where this is our mask. Great. So this mask here, where we're using, I think, a similar one. Oh, that's your actual object. This is our mask. It's similar but just choked in. We could do something like this and just do a height field mask noise, right? And instead of add, we could multiply these two together, or what we could do is we could come here and say replace. Excuse me for my alarm. We could say replace, and then we could use a height field layer node, and we could plug these two together, and we'll tell it to just do the mask and not replace, but we can do the same thing here. So it gives us a little more control. We can multiply those together. So if we look at this as to like what our mask is going to create, right now it looks like nothing. Try to play with that element size. No. Oh, that's at 0. We'll make that 2. All right, something like this. Get down to where I get kind of these little clumps, and I might even invert this, right? Because I just really want these to be inverted. So what if I do that? Let's see, post-processing. There used to be an invert on this, but that's okay. So we'll just come here and say height field, isolate layer, mask invert. So we'll just put that in there. And now if we look at these two, we probably needed to clamp this too. So clamp min and max. There we go, something like that. And so now if I put this into my white flower, which this is what we had before, if I put this in, it's going to reduce those. And now if I increase that density back up to 10, that's our primitive, that's our mask. Density by layer using mask. Turn off our lighting. Oh, that's because I have way more there than what I was expecting. I can either use I can adjust that here in the white flower. I can come down here and based on the mask cutoff, I can increase that, and that'll then cut off the mask and really kind of keep it to just the parts that are denser. But already you can see here we're getting less of a very uniform scatter, so I can just kind of keep moving this up, and it's going to favor those areas where there's just a more solid mask. So maybe that's too much, so we'll make it 0.55, right? And then I can come in here and maybe even increase this now and really kind of pack in my flowers there, which my radius will determine how much. It looks like I'm maxed out there, so if I reduce my radius a little bit, it'll allow those to kind of pack in together a little bit more and make, kind of really, really densely packed, little flower areas, if that's what I'm looking for. So this mask I don't believe it uses like a fall off to have it like thin out over time. It's kind of on or off, which is not my favorite. I would think that you would get like, better fall off from that. There's some, but it doesn't behave as well as I would expect. But this is what I would expect if you're trying to control kind of density in area. What I was talking about with the trick that you're using would be to come in here and say, after the fact, maybe you like the scattering of this grass, but then you want to create an alternate, where you could put in a different asset on that. And so that was using what you were doing, which was the attribute noise and the group, right? The group by expression, right? And you've got all that, and it's working right, And what this is doing is we're putting this on points, right? So whatever this was, how you have it set up. Now the important part is once you've created this group, the reason we create the group is so we can put down this name attribute, and the attribute that we're going to adjust is going to be tag instead of name. It's just, this is clean. We could do any type of like attribute create node or edit node, attribute edit. I think this is what we want. No, that's not it. Attribute modify. This is why I just use that name one, because it's just easy. It's just clean. You can come here and say I want you to modify tag, right? Because that's the name and it's on the points. That is the name that is right here, right? On these points that gets created is this tag attribute, which now is empty, right? If we select here, they've all got tags. But then in this, I would use the group that I generate from this group expression, which we'll call, name change or, whatever you want to call it, something that makes sense to you, right? And so let's just go through this. We're going to say it's attribute noise. It's going to be a float, and this is going to be not CD, but we'll call this name. I'll just call it the same thing as the group, name change. And this I can visualize, which is what I think you were trying to do. So I can come in here and say name visualize. So it's up here on the point attribute, show two more. There's my name change. So I can turn that on. There it is, I think. Maybe. I don't love how, if that is visualizing, let's come down here and go to our visualizer. So we'll come here and we'll edit this name change. Min max is 0 to 1. Treat is scalar. Class is point. Not sure why that's not showing up. It might be trying to put this on everything. The other thing that you have to be mindful of is this is great for kind of working out what stuff looks like. And I know we've got this delete attribute here, and we're getting it down to just, well, we should be getting it down to just our points. These are not points that are coming out of here. So I think that might be challenging when you're going into Solaris. So using this to layout is great. Once I'm done with that, what I'll do is I'll come back to all three of these, and I'll select them, and I'll change this from instance on new points. I'll turn that off. And what's going to happen here is it just becomes the points that I'm scattering onto. This is the grass, this is the, you know, all those things. Coming out of this is going to have the height field still baked in, right? And I don't want that, so I see that we're deleting those volumes, right? We're cleaning up some attributes here. These are all good things to keep. This is what you want for a height field scatter. And we could look at this, and I would think that we should still have, oh, we're deleting that attribute. We could see if we have name change still on here. No, where'd that go? Oh, because it's not hooked in, right? So, but we will be able to see this now. So we come and look at this. We've got our points, and we should be able to look at name change. There it is. So there's that attribute. So then we can use that to create our group, right? And we said that we were going to use @name change. I think it was a capital C. @name change is greater than 0.25, something like that, right? Oh, well, let's say greater than 0.675. There you go. So now I got these little clumps, right? These cool little clumps, and I can then play with that. And you've done all this. You've got all this. You're just trying to figure out, how do I get this to the next step? Well, then when I connect this in here, right, this is now doing the thing, but this is what's going to matter, right? So this tag, right, so if we look at this and we come here, this group should be my, I'm going to just type it in, name change group, right? So that's the group that I'm telling it to use, and I'm going to just do this to tag. And we can see now if I was to select above this, everything is grass, and then when I select the name, now the grass goes away, right? Because we haven't defined what this name is. So this is going to be whatever the asset name is. So asset name that I want it to pick up inside of Solaris. So I should be, you know, setting this to whatever that needs to be. So I'd come in here and say, great, you know, it looks like we have. Let me go over to Solaris and see what we've got. So as far as assets go, we've got white flower, wild grass, and grass. So ideally, we're generating something new. Or we could be using this other wild grass, you know, and stuffing it in there and breaking up that regular grass with some of the wild grass, however you want. So for now, since that's all you've got, I'm going to come back into here and I'm going to say, great, this is going to be wild grass. And let's look at however that looks in Solaris. So on the stage, grass, white flower, wild underscore grass. So that's the name of the object that we want. So we want to match that. So that needs to be the same, right? Because that's how it's going to pick up. So this should be wild underscore grass. So now all those little clumps are going to pick up that wild grass instead of the regular grass. Like if we look at this guy again and come through here, so some white flowers are going to be changed, grass is going to be changed, but I believe there's no wild grass in any of that because it hadn't happened yet. So those will become wild grass now, and then when this gets added, this will all be wild grass. So I would probably then go back, right, and do the same gag, right, the same kind of setup here. I'm trying not to inadvertently reconnect stuff here. But I would probably come in here and copy this, paste this here, right? Do that. I might change these attributes a little bit, so on the wild grass I get something different. So probably need to actually delete that attribute first, so we'll do an attribute delete. Right, and we're going to say, great, let's get rid of, I wonder if that wild grass is like coming over. No, cool, it's only over there. Sweet. And so then we add this guy here, and we're going to delete that point attribute, which is name change. So we kind of clear the field, and then we'll come back in. And on the group, we want this just to be on this wild grass. So we could say @tag equals wild grass. I think that'll work. Yes, so you can see here, that little yellow point there is because it's the grouping. Oh, because we changed those to be wild grass. So our order of operation might be a little bit messed up here. So you can see here that that's capturing based on that tag. So we probably should use a different name for something here. So, and it's going to be, oh no, see, that's exactly what I didn't want it to do. It reconnected. Instead of wild grass, what we could do is call this wild grass 2. Okay, and so now you can see it's only hitting what's wild grass, and we've now got this group that creates these little clumps. Obviously it's not, this is a lot thinner in its distribution than this one is, so we don't have as many instances there. And then we could change this from wild grass to grass. All right, so now we're taking, this is all wild grass, and then we're putting in some smaller clumps. So we can come to this guy maybe and take its element size and make it 5, like so. So there we can see as they kind of turn that orangey color, right? So there we're gonna have clumps of our other grass, you know, and then come in here and say great. So we've changed that to grass. So then the next thing I want to do is I want to take my wild grass too and fix that. So I'll use an attribute. How would I do that? Oh, there's a lot of different ways. What's the easiest way? I would do this. I would put down a name attribute. Okay, another one here. And for the group, I would say @tag equals wild grass 2. And then I would just name it wild grass. Oops. So now what we've effectively done is if we look at this tag before, right, on this one, we'll come down here at the bottom, we'll have wild grass 2, and then we select this one, and that should, oh, that's because this is not supposed to be wild. This should be not named, but tag. And so if we select that, oh, it's not fixing it. Wild grass 2. Because that needs to be point. There we go. This is a gotcha here, is making sure that the attribute you're trying to modify is the right class that's being edited by the node. So you saw that just by changing that, right, that it disappears. Because we essentially, by putting the 2 on the end of this, we kind of stow it. We kind of cache it away, and then we do some edits, and then we kind of remodify it at the end. And so then this becomes over here, and then this becomes our new set of points out. And then when you instance all of this stuff onto it, it'll pick up the right thing. So if we come back out to the stage, now this will work on your instancer properly. Because I think in here, what are we doing in here? Yeah, I'm fascinated by what this must have been doing. Was it would have been using because they were all packed primitives, it was using the point of each of those instanced objects as what to copy your new geometry onto. The problem with that is those geos, their central point is halfway up the stalk. I need to be able to draw. I need to use a different tool. So, you know, if you have a plant, let's see here, I'm using a brush, good, right? We have a plant, so it's like, you know, it's got a stalk and a little flower at the top. When we're scattering and we leave the plants, you notice how I turned off the instancing, so it was just the points. When you instance the objects on the height field scatter, the centroid of that object, okay, is the point of the packed geometry that results. So when that comes into our Solaris via the instancer by emerging that in, then it's copying it onto this point. It has all the right attributes and all the things, but what happens is our new plant grows out of that point instead of here at the ground. So by turning off those instances and bringing in just the points, when we turn that off, then it just outputs the point, right, which is down on the surface. And it has all the attributes, the same attributes that the centroid had, to then allow us to put the right thing on there. So you want to make sure you're turning that off, and this will give you a better result. So I hope that helps.